Hello Synapse community, my name is Ryan Majidimehr and I'm a product manager on the Azure Synapse Analytics team. This is our fourth episode in our series on Azure Synapse and Power BI Datamart. Talk about how they complement each other and work together to address a broad range of analytics scenarios as well as advanced analytics. Previously we talked about what each of these components are, the lakehouse, as well as data warehouse. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a low-code approach to using Azure Synapse. And we're going to take all of that data in the data lake and enrich that data with Azure Cognitive Services. And then we're going to use Power BI Datamart to make that data available for self-service analytics. As always, I have with me Pawel Potasinski. He's going to explain what exactly is this scenario. Welcome, Pawel.
Thank you, Ryan. The purpose of this scenario is to show how people without data science or strong programming skills can perform advanced analytics and enrich the data with the result of this analysis. We will start with some data stored in a data lake. Then we will use Synapse Studio to load the data into a Spark table and enrich the data with Azure Cognitive Services by performing sentiment analysis. Finally, we will load the enriched data into the Power BI Datamart for self-service analytics purposes. And we will do all this mainly by clicking. Well, okay, I'll write one line of code at some point.
Sounds cool. I can't wait to see the demo. Can you show us how to do sentiment analysis in Synapse?
Sure, let me walk you through this demo step by step. Here I am connected to my Azure Synapse workspace using Synapse Studio. I've already uploaded my data to the data lake, so I can go and explore it by navigating to the Data Hub and choosing Linked tab, and then selecting my data lake. For the purpose of this demo, I will use a single CSV file containing my real exported tweets. But of course, you can manage and process terabytes of data in your data lake. Also, in this simple demo, the data is already exported from Twitter, while in real-life scenario, you can use different tools or Twitter API to implement a repetitive data ingestion process. Let's preview the data by simply right-clicking the file and selecting the Preview option. As you can see, this dataset contains three columns: date, time, and tweet. Our goal will be to add sentiment column to this dataset. The first step will be to load the data into the Spark table. To be able to do this, I need a Spark pool. Here, I already have the Spark pool created earlier. In Synapse Studio, loading the data from a data lake into a Spark table is as simple as right-clicking on a file and selecting New Notebook, New Spark table. Then I need to choose the Spark pool that I will use to run the auto-generated notebook. Also, I can change the code, for example, by providing a meaningful name for my Spark table. Let's call it tweets. And also by uncommenting the header option in the line of code responsible for loading the data from my CSV file into a Spark data frame. Finally, I can run the code. The first code run requires an Apache Spark session to start, so expect the entire operation to take a short while. When the code run is successful, I can switch to the Workspace tab of the Data Hub and check whether there is a new tweets table in the default lake database. As you can see, I have my newly created tweets table ready to use. The next step will be to use the language service of Azure Cognitive Services to process the tweets in my Spark table and enrich the dataset with information about the sentiment of each tweet. To achieve this, I need to create in my workspace a linked service to an existing language service using Azure Cognitive Services connector. Before I can create a linked service for a language service using security best practices, I need a key vault service to securely store and share the key of the language service. In this case, I have the entire setup prepared. I have both services, Language Service and Key Vault, created in my Azure Resource Group. In Key Vault, I securely store the key of the language service, and the managed identity of my Azure Synapse workspace can access it thanks to the appropriate access policy. And in my Azure Synapse workspace, I have linked services for both language service and Key Vault created. Notice that the linked service created for language service uses the second linked service to point to the Key Vault service to retrieve a securely stored key. Now when my linked service are ready to use, I can go back to the Data Hub, right-click on the Tweets Spark table, select Machine Learning, Predict with a Model, select Sentiment Analysis, select existing linked service pointing to the language service, pick Tweet as a text column for processing, and open the automatically generated notebook that will allow me to run sentiment analysis. I can run this notebook to check the results of the sentiment analysis. So I choose the Spark pool and click Run All. After a short while, I can see the results. However, I want the results of the analysis to go back to the Lake database so that I can analyze them using Power BI. So I will replace the last line of the existing code with a piece of code that allows me to select the columns I'm interested in, including the sentiment column from the analysis results, and then save the results to a new Spark table. I rerun the notebook. And when the execution is completed, I check for the new table in my Lake database. I can see that my Tweets sentiment table is created and ready to use.
Awesome. That looks so easy. In fact, I think I only saw you write one line of code. So, how can we load this enriched data into Power BI Datamart?
Let me show you how by connecting Power BI Datamart to Azure Synapse to consume the result of our sentiment analysis using SQL. How is it possible that I created a table with the results of the sentiment analysis using Spark, and now I will use SQL to analyze them? Well, this is possible thanks to the metadata sharing between Spark and serverless SQL runtimes. In short, I can use serverless SQL to run SQL queries over the tables in the Lake database created with Spark. To connect to my Lake database using the serverless SQL pool, I need to copy the endpoint address from the Azure portal. To do this, I go to my Synapse workspace in Azure portal, and in the Overview tab, I'm looking for serverless SQL endpoint and simply copy it to the clipboard. Now it's time to switch to the Power BI portal and create a new Power BI Datamart. I click New Datamart Preview. Then I click Get Data. I search for Synapse connector. I select Azure Synapse Analytics SQL DW, and then I paste my serverless SQL endpoint and the name of the database. Also, I have to specify the credentials for my connection. Here I have my credentials already specified. And now I can see my tables, including my Tweets sentiment table that I want to analyze. I can see the preview, click the Transform Data button, and then I can use Power Query to transform my data as required. For example, I notice that my date column requires a date type change. So I click on a date type and I select using locale because I want to use the date data type, but using my locale Polish. Looks like everything is ready to load, so I just click Save to load the data in my Datamart. Once I have the data loaded into the Datamart, I can run SQL queries to analyze the data. For example, here I'm grouping tweets by sentiment to find out that usually they were either neutral or positive. Also, after the August update to Power BI Datamart, I can immediately create a report to continue my analysis. For example, let me quickly build a chart showing my tweets distributed by sentiment. As you can see, thanks to the metadata sharing in Azure Synapse Analytics, I can connect to Spark tables using the same serverless SQL pool I used in the lakehouse scenario in the second episode of our series. Well, in fact, we connected to the lakehouse.
Thanks, Pawel. So to summarize, you don't need any data science or data engineering experience or skills to do advanced analytics with Azure Synapse. And with Power BI Datamart, it makes it really easy to distribute this data to a broad array of people for self-service analytics. But how about you? Have you done AI or ML with Synapse? Have you thought about doing it? Have you used Power BI Datamart? Tell us in the comments. Tell us what you're using it for. Are you finding it as easy as we find it? Are you stumbling with it? We would like to hear about both of those types of experiences. I personally would love to hear about it. Again, my name is Ryan Majidimehr. You can find me on Twitter. I'm sure there's other people you can find on Twitter. Yes, Pawel. You can find Pawel on Twitter. It's unbelievably Pawel Potasinski on Twitter. You can also find Synapse on Twitter, Azure_Synapse. Also, if you're into the Twitter or other social media platforms that I'm sure are very exciting as well, we have a program. The Azure Synapse Influencer Program is very exciting. We do regular events. I hear... No. There's more exciting stuff, and it's coming. There'll be announcements, I'm sure. I'm sure I would get in trouble now if I told you about these things that I'm going to announce, or they're going to announce, the ephemeral them. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.